Hello and welcome to our very first podcast episode on behalf of Midwest Veterinary Supply's Bovine unit. Like I said, this is our very first episode, and I just want to thank you all for listening and tuning in. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your neighbors. We are talking all things bovine here. We really hope to share relevant information to support our bovine veterinarians while telling their stories and being an industry ally. First of all, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Bill Doig. He will be on the episode later. As far as co-hosts go for a bovine podcast, Bill could not be any better. He has a Bachelor of Science in Animal Science from Purdue University, so he's no slouch. And he was a member of the Intercollegiate Livestock Judging Team. He also has his Master of Science in Ruminant Nutrition from the University of Kentucky. His research areas included grazing management, amino acid disappearance through the small intestine, and he was also coach of the Intercollegiate Livestock Judging Team for 3 whole years, so he knows his cows. As for Bill's professional background, he's worked 7 years in academic extension as a livestock specialist for Ohio State, Missouri, and Purdue universities. He's worked 2 years as a livestock nutritional consultant and sales specialist, and he's currently in his 8th year working as an outside sales representative for Midwest Veterinary Supply. Bill also currently raises cattle with his wife Joni, his daughters Ava and Bremley, and his son Corbin. And their family is the 4th generation to be running a purebred cow-calf operation focusing on show cattle and selling freezer beef. As for myself, I'm Jessica Benson, and I'm the marketing program manager for the bovine unit at Midwest Veterinary Supply. And I just want to thank Midwest for having the confidence in me to start this new adventure, podcasting. Before I came to Midwest, I was a farm broadcaster, so I feel right at home recording this, and I'm very excited to bring a new element to Midwest Vet Supply. I graduated from North Dakota State University with a degree in animal science as well, just like Bill, and I had a minor in ag communications. I also grew up in the cattle industry. My family raises commercial beef cattle in northern Minnesota. So without further ado, here is our podcast episode with Dr. Travis White from SCCL. He's currently out in Idaho getting ready for a snowstorm. But let's talk colostrum before the snowflakes fly.
So I grew up on a cow-calf operation in Idaho, and actually when I graduated high school, I had no ambitions to ever go to college. And so I rodeoed on the weekends, and then I worked in the oil fields as a pipe fitter. And, life circumstances kind of push you in different directions. And so decided that it was time to change career paths, and went to Utah State University for undergraduate school, and then ended up going to Washington State University for vet school. And then when I graduated vet school, I opened a private practice in central South Dakota. It was about 95% cow-calf, with a large portion of that being club calves. And then after about 8 years, sold that practice and went to Transova Genetics. I helped develop and lead their training program for veterinarians. So that today is called Transova University.
Okay.
And then had the opportunity to come on with Saskatoon and have been here about 3.5 years now.
Nice. So talk about vet school. Like at the time that you wanted to get into vet school, was it as difficult as it is now? Is it kind of the same climate?
Yeah. So on average, your average student applied 3 times to get in. So you had about a third of a chance to get into vet school. Highly competitive. Back then it was really based on more on academics than anything. And so you had to have a certain GPA to even be considered. Some of the schools have loosened those requirements, and now they just have like a minimum GPA. So if you have say a 3.6, then you kind of are guaranteed an interview at least. So they're trying to broaden the scope of who can get in, but still fairly competitive, even, almost 15 years ago now. Mm-hmm. But also, much like today, the proportion of large animal interest is extremely small, so probably less than 1% of the class was interested in cattle specifically. We had quite a few equine interests, but as far as cattle, there was very, very low interest. And so, we talk a lot about the veterinary shortage and things going on, and it's a real issue. We see it throughout the industry where dairy producers and beef producers are struggling to get a veterinarian in their community that's willing to do large animal work.
Yeah. So go ahead.
And a lot of that goes back to, who are we selecting to get into vet school?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you could tell any vets that are undecided, why should they go into food animal or large animal?
Well, I mean, it's a very rewarding career. You get to work with the salt of the earth people, and you get to spend a lot more time outside enjoying nature and things like that. But for most of it's like I tell a lot of people about the beef and dairy industry. Most people don't do it for the money; they do it for the lifestyle. And it's similar in large animal. You're definitely going to make more money as a small animal veterinarian, but you choose to be a large animal veterinarian because of the lifestyle and what you get to do each day. And it's been an extremely rewarding career for me. If you would have asked me when I graduated vet school if I would be in industry now, I wouldn't be where I am today. But at the same time, I had a misconception too about what veterinary medicine was. To me, the veterinarian was the community animal doc that saw everything, spayed the cat, pregnant cows, worked on lame horses. They were kind of the jack of all trades. And then when you get into vet school, you realize that there's specialties just like in human medicine, and you can really carve your path to become whatever you want to be. So.
Yeah. Well, so let's get on the topic of what we're here for today. Colostrum. What's the big deal about colostrum? Why should we care? Obviously, we're in the middle of calving season, so that's a good reason. But I mean, from your standpoint, why should we care about this?
Yeah, so when we think about the immune system, right? So our immune system protects us against pathogens, right? So diseases, it protects us. And unlike you and I, when we were in utero, we got all of the antibodies we needed via the placenta in utero. We actually don't have to have colostrum when we're born from an immune standpoint. Now, there's been lots of research that shows there's benefits to human babies receiving colostrum, but it's not a necessity from an immunological standpoint.
Visit us online at Creighton.
But cattle are different. All ruminants are different. There's no placental transfer of immunoglobulin or antibodies. So the only way that they get any antibodies to protect themselves against disease is through the ingestion of colostrum. So in essence, colostrum is the immune system of the animal, because their own active immune system really doesn't start to function till they're 18 days old or so. And so for those first 18 to 20 days, the colostral immunoglobulin or the colostral antibodies are the only thing that calf can rely on to protect itself against things like diarrhea and pneumonia.
Yeah. And so, let's start from very simple terms. What is it made from? And then we'll get more complicated as we go with the questions. But yeah, what is it made from? What makes it so important?
Yeah. So in the U.S. specifically, colostrum kind of comes in 3 different flavors, right? So we have whole bovine colostrum, which is colostrum that is collected from cows. It's heat treated to kill the pathogens. It's dried down, packaged, and shipped out. So it's as close to Mother Nature as you can get. And then we have what we call component-based colostrums, where those are going to be an IgG source, typically colostrum, and then it's more or less mixed with milk replacer to become a colostrum replacer or supplement. And then the third one is what we call serum-based. So that's immunoglobulins that are derived from blood serum with milk replacer to create a colostrum supplement or or replacer. And the thing that producers need to remember is we want to be as close to Mother Nature as possible. We tend to focus on the IgG, but there's other bioactive factors that are found in colostrum that are as important, if not in some cases more important than the IgG. So things like colostral fat would be an extremely important component of colostrum, that if we're using a component colostrum or a serum-based colostrum, we lose that colostral fat and all of the other bioactives.
Okay.
So I guess, Travis, a question. So right now in our own cattle operation, we're calving, and I've kind of kept my barn camera turned on today. I've got a couple cows that are pretty close. And for the people that are listening to this, that are the sales reps, it could be other vet clinics, other producers that may be listening to this, I guess, just explain again within the first 24 hours why it's so important for these types of products to be administered to the calf if something happens where they can't get it from mother.
Yeah, so oftentimes we hear, the first 24 hours. But in reality, the first 2 hours are the most important. So the calf's ability to absorb colostrum is the highest in the first 2 hours of life. By about 6 hours of life, we've lost about half of the absorptive capacity of the gut. And by 12 hours, we're really into the teens, like 15% of that calf's ability to absorb colostrum. So colostrum is a very time-sensitive thing. And just like I said, the importance of colostrum is that it is the calf's immune system. It's the only thing going to protect that calf against disease for the first 20 days of life or so. And so it's extremely important that we get high levels of IgG into those calves as early as possible. And so, we talk about in the beef industry, how do we go about doing that? And so I don't know if this is a question coming up, but what's the difference? Oftentimes we get the question, what's the difference between a supplement and a replacer, right? Yeah. And so supplements are typically, they're going to be in that 50 to 60 grams of IgG range, where your replacers are going to be over 100 grams of IgG. And just like the name says, one is a supplement. So that calf is going to eventually get up, nurse mom, get some IgGs from maternal colostrum, and we're just trying to supplement that maternal colostrum. So typically we would use that. We've got a slow calf that's slow to get up. So it's not up in the first 2 hours. We would supplement that calf to help get an energy dump and then also provide some IgG. But we're fairly confident that calf's going to get up and eventually nurse mom. The other area where we use a lot of supplements is in first calf heifers. So if we look at the beef industry, about 33% of calves fail passive transfer. Conversely, in the dairy industry, it's about 10 to 12%. And we say, well, why is that? Beef cow colostrum is typically much better than dairy cow colostrum. But the reason that is because the dairy calf, we're giving that calf colostrum in the first 2 hours every time. Mm-hmm. And so whether that comes from a maternal source or a replacer, we are actively delivering that colostrum to that calf. Where in the beef industry, we kind of leave it up to Mother Nature. And so we have things like weather events, calves that are slow to get up, poor mothering, bad udder conformation, things like that. And so because we leave it up to Mother Nature, we have to be more actively involved in the calving process if we want to reduce the amount of failure of passive transfer. And so again, we have a beef, what we call a beef protocol. And so the first step is that calf up within 2 hours, actively bonded with the dam, suckling aggressively. If that's the case, that's the ideal situation, then we don't do anything. But if that calf hasn't gotten up in the first 2 hours, then we would initially come in with a supplement or an initial dose of colostrum. And then at that 8-hour mark, again, we'd come back and reevaluate. Is that calf up nursing now? If it is, great. It can go on about its daily life. But if that calf still isn't up, then we would provide a second dose of colostrum so that we're then that would be a case of fully replacing that calf. Of course, replacement, it's going to replace maternal colostrum. So that calf isn't going to get any maternal colostrum. So this is your bottle calves that are orphaned at birth, twins that we've separated one twin. And the other argument I'd make for replacement is dystocia. So if we have calving difficulties, we know that those calves that are born via dystocia have a 35% reduction in their ability to absorb colostrum. So even if they're getting an adequate amount, an adequate amount for a normal calf from the dam, they're not getting enough antibody just to achieve passive transfer. So we have to provide supplemental or replacement colostrum just to get that calf to achieve passive transfer because they've got an ability to absorb the colostrum.
Yeah, and so Travis.
So with that,
go ahead, Bill.
Sorry, I was just going to add on to that. If then you have a dystocia situation, would you recommend that the vet clinic have a protocol for if they go out and assist on the farm, they automatically will go ahead and supplement in that case, since there's, I think you said, 35% chance that
Yep.
It may not take naturally that way? Okay.
Yeah, so I actually would recommend they give a full, at least 100 grams of IgG. So kind of a replacer dose to all of those calves that are born via dystocia. So that's what I did in my practice, right? So if I had a cow come in for a C-section or dystocia, those calves never got onto the trailer without a dose of colostrum. I had no idea what I was doing at the time. I wasn't associated with colostrum and didn't have the education I have now. I was using it more as like a heat source because these calves are going to get on a trailer in February and be trailered 60 miles. I know they're not going to get up and nurse while they're on the trailer. And so I was using it as more of a heat source for those calves. But looking back now, it was much more important to get that dose of colostrum into those calves early so that then when they get to the farm, they can kind of recover, and then we're going to get better absorption because we have this lower absorptive capacity of the gut because of the stress of calving, and those calves are just going to perform better.
So that you're saying we need to focus more so on that 2-hour window, right? So
Yep.
let's say we miss that 2-hour window. What's the prognosis for these calves if we miss that? Is it still okay, or are we kind of SOL?
Yeah, it's still okay. Again, if we're within 6 to 8 hours, again, we've lost about half of the absorptive capacity of the gut, so we may have to provide more IgG mass to those calves. But if you think about the prognosis, say a calf fails passive transfer. Like I said, we got 33% of the beef calves fail passive transfer. So what are the consequences of failure of passive transfer? Well, in the studies they've done, those calves that fail passive transfer are about 9.5 times more likely to become sick prior to weaning. They're about 5.5 times more likely to die prior to weaning. They grow at about 2/3 the rate of calves that achieve passive transfer, and their feed efficiency is reduced by 50% all the way out to 6 months of age. So as we talk about commodity costs and feed costs that we're putting into these animals, to have that feed efficiency and conversion reduce that much, that's a huge cost to the producer, let alone the health events if a calf gets sick and we have to treat it. And oftentimes we think about failure of passive transfer in calves that develop diarrhea. But we're actually finding that even calves that develop pneumonia, say at 30 days, or have pink eye, things like that, that can all lead back to colostrum. So having that weakened immune system initially then kind of sets them up for failure throughout their life. So again, as we talk about supplementing, I talked about first calf heifers, but also cows that have a history. So if we have a history of a cow that weans a light calf, or a calf that developed scours last year, developed pneumonia last year, that's a cow that maybe isn't producing adequate colostrum. And we should probably think about supplementing her calf this year so that we can ensure that it's getting an adequate amount of IgG.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess when I look at the different things that are out there, are there major differences between the colostrum brands And then what sets your products apart from some of the others?
Yeah, so what sets us apart is we are whole bovine colostrum. So we collect colostrum from cows. We standardize it so that you get the same product every time. We heat treat it to kill all the pathogens, including Johne's disease. We dry it down and we ship it out. One of the other differentiating factors is we're a veterinary biologic. So we are held to the same standards as, say, antibiotics and vaccines. So we're regulated by the USDA. And if we say there's 100 grams of IgG in the bag, we have to prove that through third-party validation. If we claim that it's safe to give to a calf, again, we have to do research trials to prove that. We have a label claim for the treatment or prevention of failure or passive transfer. To get that label claim, we had to do a research study to prove that. So those would be the two major differentiating factors. But like you said, there's lots of different products on the market. And so that's what I encourage producers to look for, is we want something as close to Mother Nature as we can get. Colostrum has over 240 bioactive compounds, and those are there for a reason. Mother Nature has put those into colostrum. You know, I look at it a lot like the Impossible Burger, right? So
should you be mentioning that on this?
Well, Mother Nature has been providing meat in a perfect source for millennia. And she's been providing colostrum in a perfect form for just as long. And so this idea that we can take all these plant-based or components and put them together, meat or milk or colostrum, I think is somewhat of a fallacy. Like I said, all these bioactives are there for a reason. They stimulate the calf's gut to develop, help to establish a good, healthy commensal gut flora. They have natural antimicrobial properties, things like that. And those are all there for a reason. And so we need to choose a colostrum that is as close to Mother Nature as possible. We want it to be full fat and nothing added, nothing taken away. Where most of our other products on the market are going to use alternative fat sources like coconut oil, edible tallow, things like that. And we know that that doesn't stimulate thermogenesis the way that colostral fat does. A lot of them are going to lack the bioactives because they are more or less milk replacers. So we don't have all of these bioactive factors that are active within maternal colostrum. So I would encourage producers, as you're looking at a colostrum, is look at the ingredient list. Like our packaging, you will never see an ingredient list because there's only one ingredient, whole bovine colostrum. But if you flip that package over and there's 60 to 80 different ingredients, that's going to tell you that that's a component or a serum-based product, and we should probably steer clear of those.
Absolutely. You know, Bill's going to talk about the fat content here next, but thermogenesis, you said that big fancy word. Can you break that down a little bit for me and our listeners?
Yeah, so thermogenesis is the ability of a calf to regulate its body temperature. And calves thermoregulate through two mechanisms. One is through shivering. So, 50 to 60% of their ability to thermoregulate comes from shivering, which requires a lot of energy to shiver. The other 40 to 50% comes from what's called brown fat metabolism. So calves are born with 3 to 4% of their body weight as brown fat. And brown fat is this unique fat. It's which powerhouse of the cell. And that's what gives it the brown color. The mitochondria tend to be kind of a brown color. But this brown fat is essential for a calf to thermoregulate. But we can only get brown fat metabolism in the presence of colostral fat. So they kind of have to combine together to light the fire. Where if we're using an alternative fat source or defatted colostrum, you can never start that thermogenic fire because we have to have the two in combination. And so we actually did a research project here recently where we looked at the effects of colostral fat. So we fed all just on day one. IgG content was exactly the same. The only difference was that one group of calves were fed full fat colostrum. The other group was fed defatted colostrum. And so we had defatted that colostrum down to about 5.7% versus full fat colostrum being about 22%. And so again, the only difference was day one, what they got in the first 12 hours. So they got 2 doses of either full fat colostrum or defatted colostrum. And again, we were looking at it just from a thermogenic standpoint. So our hypothesis was that calves would be able to regulate their body temperature better than if they got defatted colostrum. But what came out of that study was significantly more important. So calves fed defatted colostrum had a 50% increase in respiratory disease. Calves fed defatted colostrum had a 6% increase in mortality. They didn't spend as much time being active, so they spent a lot more time laying down. And then they weaned, or at 90 days, they were 14 and a half pounds lighter. So their average daily gain was affected as well. So, and just like we thought, through our hypothesis, they were able to thermoregulate better. But, you know, what we did in the first 12 hours is going to have lifelong health impacts for this calf. So that colostral fat is an essential component. And that's why I said at the beginning is that, you know, we tend to focus on the IgG as being the most important thing about colostrum. But some of these bioactives are just as important, if not more important than the IgG in some cases. So that colostral fat is essential for thermoregulation. And we think about the winter we've had so far. You know, we've had snow and cold, and we have to get colostral fat into those calves so they can maintain their body temperature and thrive.
Yeah.
So just to expand upon that a little bit more, I feel like as a sales rep, when I have a conversation with an account or a veterinarian, most of the time they talk about IgG. You know, they don't mention fat content. They don't ask about it. So if they're looking at specifically at your product and the fat content, what's the 2 biggest takeaways with your products and the fat content, again, versus some of the competing ones that might be out there?
Yeah. So again, we want to be looking for a full fat. So somewhere between 16, 18%, upwards of 24% fat. That's going to be kind of the fat content of our products that are out there. And we want it to be a colostral fat. So again, if we flip over the package and it has an ingredient list and the fat is coconut oil or dairy fat or edible tallow, things like that, those types of fats are not going to stimulate that thermogenic process. And so we have to be looking for colostrum that contains colostral fat only.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I think we kind of covered this next question, just describing some scenarios, you know, of when to use a supplement and replacer, right? I think we kind of nailed that. Yeah. So and we've also talked about statistics and research, but is there anything else you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's research coming out every year. You know, we are the most researched colostrum on the market, so we do tons of research every year. And as we look at it, again, we're starting to find things out, like this colostral fat thing. We had no idea that we were going to see these major health impacts just from the application of colostral fat. So these bioactive compounds are becoming more important, as we discover more of them and how they function within the animal, it's really becoming more apparent that we have to be using whole bovine colostrum, because these other colostrum supplements and replacers just lack all of these bioactive compounds. So, you know, on the dairy industry, we're talking a lot about post-day 1 nutrition right now. So providing a small amount of colostrum, trying to mimic what that beef calf does. So if you think about the nature of a beef calf, it may focus on one quarter for a period of time, then move to the other quarter. And that calf gets the benefit of what we call transition colostrum. So small amounts of colostrum for about the first 2 weeks of life. And so as we look at how all these bioactives support that calf's gut development, microbiome development, binding up pathogens, killing pathogens within the gut lumen, that's all becoming more apparent. And we're seeing profound health impacts as far as reductions in morbidity and mortality and improvements in average daily gain. I think in the beef industry, we can take this back to the bottle calf, right? So we have the bottle calf that's born, and why is the bottle calf always the the weakest calf, the lightest calf we wean, things like that. Well, they don't get this benefit of transition colostrum. And so providing a small amount of colostrum to those bottle calves also is going to help them to develop and perform better. The research is just rife right now. We're seeing all kinds of research studies come out and the impacts or the health benefits of colostral fat. If you look on the human side, again, the research is just rife with the health impacts of colostrum. And we're seeing a lot of companies now harvesting maternal colostrum and using it on the human health side. Or oftentimes I ask producers or veterinarians, we see these colostrum supplements or replacers on the market that are component type colostrum. So they have an IgG source that is colostrum, but then we've mixed it with milk replacer, like I said. So why would a company do that? Is it more cost effective to buy commodities on the open market than it is to just dry down the colostrum that you collect? No, it's much more lucrative for them to market those bioactives on the human health side of things. So they'll have two arms to their company where they have a human nutrition and they're marketing all these bioactives like lactoferrin and colostral fat and all that, and making a lot more money than they are on the cattle side of things. We've taken a different approach. We want to be solely cattle focused or ruminant focused. We don't want the human market to detract from what we do. And so we've decided that we want to play in the animal health game. We don't want to be in the human side of things.
Animals are easier. So would you mind sharing, I remember, was it when we were in Long Beach, you talked about a producer that ended up using your product and now he's just mad at you because he has to always use it now because it works so well. Was that you? Or am I thinking of a story?
Yeah. I mean, we have lots of those situations, right? So we'll have producers that switch over to, they're having huge health impacts. And so then they'll switch over to using colostrum, our colostrum. And, everything goes away. And then, producers tend to have short-term memory loss, right? So we forget that we changed something specifically and now things have gotten better. And so then he tries going away from colostrum and everything turns into a wreck again. And so then, he's like, I'm angry because now I have to rely on your product because that's the only way I can keep calves healthy. And so colostrum replacement and supplementation, again, I think there's areas where we know we need to apply them. Again, that bottle calf that's orphaned, the first calf heifer we need to supplement. There's going to be situations where we know we have to apply them. But we have other situations where it may become a necessity as well. So things like Johne's disease. If we have a cow with suspected Johne's disease, we have to supplement or replace the colostrum for that calf. Those calves get infected by ingesting contaminated colostrum. And so that would be one situation. We'll see salmonella outbreaks or E. coli outbreaks where we have high death losses in calves. And again, going to full replacer is the only way to kind of break that chain. And so it is another tool that we can use when we have kind of disaster scenarios. And oftentimes, especially with, say, K99 E. coli, this may be something that they deal with every year. And so because they have this issue, they may have to rely on colostrum replacement during their calving periods just to prevent the high death losses.
Could you go over, I guess, for us, maybe some recommendations as a cow calf producer at home? I think we look at colostrum as a defense. It's something you don't proactively think about. It's always, I need it when this emergency happens, or I need this when this doesn't work the way it's supposed to. I guess what's a good recommendation for not only a clinic, but also for the end user of the products, as far as how much of this should I keep on hand? And if you want to then kind of touch base on the different products that your company has that are available through Midwest in the United States, just kind of if you want to tie those two things together.
Yeah. So how much should I have on hand? Again, 33% of our calves fail passive transfer. So a producer in an ideal situation should have enough to at least supplement 33% of their calves. Now, again, there's going to be times when we have to fully replace a calf, and so we may need to even have a little bit extra than that 33%. But we need to be actively identifying situations where calves need colostrum. So, like you said, most of the time it's a reactive situation, right? I go out to check calves, and I've got one that's frozen, and I don't know if it's ingested colostrum. So I get that calf in, and that's where I feel like I need to use colostrum. Or I've got the calf that cow dies during labor, and I know it's not going to get anything. That bottle calf, the twin that I pulled off the cow. So we've got these reactive situations, but we need to be more actively looking at what cows need to be supplemented. So we know those situations. We know the calf that's been orphaned. We know the twin. We know the calf we found frozen, and we don't know if it has ingested colostrum. But again, having an active role in the calving season and looking for those opportunities. So like I said, first calf heifers, notoriously short on colostrum. You know, oftentimes we hear producers say, well, I never keep replacement heifers out of my first calf heifers because they're always lighter, they don't form as well. It's our best genetics. So why aren't we keeping replacement heifers out of our first calf heifers? But again, those calves are notorious for failing passive transfer. So if we look at that 33% of calves that fail passive transfer, well over 50% of that would come from first calf heifer calves. So those opportunities, again, if that calf is not up within the first 2 hours, actively nursing, well bonded with the dam, then we need to intervene at that point and provide a supplement dose of colostrum. And then again, an 8-hour check. If that calf isn't up within 8 hours, nursing again, then we need to provide another dose. So if guys are calving through a barn and have cameras or something like that, it's an easy way to monitor those calves. Otherwise, we're kind of having to play a more active role in that. As far as the different products that are available, so we've got CCT Gold. That would be kind of the 60-gram supplemental dose. Then we have what we call high cal. So high cal is going to be more adept for cold temperatures. It's going to be 100-gram replacer dose with the highest level of colostral fat. So really helps those calves to thermoregulate. And then we have Colostrum 200, which would be, that's kind of your premier replacement dose of colostrum. So provides 200 grams of IgG in one dose. And then you guys also carry the Colostrix line.
Yep, I believe so.
Yeah, so then Colostrix, we're going to have a Colostrix supplement, which is again is a 50-gram dose, and then Colostrum or Colostrix replacer, which is the 100-gram dose. But even at those, you know, there's kind of a misnomer in that we call 100 grams a replacer. So when I graduated vet school 15 years ago, we were taught that calves needed 100 grams of IgG in the first 24 hours. You know, we've talked extensively already about the timing. It's no longer 24 hours. We really have to have it in the first 6 to 8 hours. And then this idea that 100 grams is adequate. So if we provide calves with 100 grams of IgG, and that's all the colostrum they're going to get, about 30% of those calves will still fail passive transfer. And so we really need to be giving doses of at least 150, even 200 grams. And actually the new recommendations from the National Animal Health Monitoring System is that for full replacer doses, calves need 300 grams of IgG. So way more IgG than what we've been recommending in the past. So there is, like I said, a bit of a misnomer to call 100 gram a replacer dose. That's just kind of the industry standard. But if we have a calf that we truly want to thrive, we know it's not going to get any maternal colostrum, we really need to be looking at giving at least 300 grams of IgG. So 3 bags of 100-gram colostrum replacer.
Yeah, and so, okay, I have to ask this though. In the beef industry, 33% fail passive transfer, you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's some obvious reasons, right? Dairy is more hands-on and whatnot. I can't really speak to that side, but why is that so high? I know you got some people that calve out in barns. You got everyone right in one little spot. We've got some operations that calve, out on, big open pastures. So what really is it though? Why is that so high?
Yeah. So why is it so high? I actually believe this is just my theory. I haven't been able to prove this out. But I believe that evolutionarily, Mother Nature kind of built that into the system, right? So if we have 33% of our calves that fail passive transfer, we're going to have a large population of calves that are weak and unable to thrive. It's going to be more food for the prey, right? So we're going to have weaker animals that the prey can feed on, and then the healthier, more robust animals go on to thrive and reproduce later on. Now, because we're in a production system, we don't want weak calves that are able to be preyed upon. So again, I think evolutionarily, some of this was built into the system, but now we're wanting to take away that variability. And so again, situations where, cows, again, a history that's weaned a light calf or a calf that's developed pneumonia or scours, that may be an indication that cow doesn't have adequate colostrum. Again, our first calf heifers notoriously don't produce enough colostrum. As cow age on them, their colostrum quality tends to go down. So we're going to have a higher proportion of those calves that fail passive transfer as we look at cows that are over 10 years of age. And then we've got, again, weather events. So if we have a big snowstorm or a blizzard that comes through and those calves they kind of bed down and they don't get up and get an adequate dose of colostrum right off the bat, or poor mothers. I mean, oftentimes we have cows, especially heifers, again, that kind of are confused about the whole situation and they don't really know how to mother the calf and get the calf to ingest colostrum. But like I said, a lot of this I think is built into the system to provide food for the prey so the healthy survive. But we don't want that in our production system. And up till now, we've kind of just dealt with it, right? Now we have 33% of our calves that fail passive transfer, but we don't have huge wrecks, right? I mean, 33% of our calves aren't dying and 33% of our calves aren't getting sick. And again, that's how this whole idea of transition colostrum came about in the dairy industry. Is why does that beef calf thrive when we have a higher incidence of failure of passive transfer? So that calf is getting supported through some maternal colostrum being provided for the first couple of weeks of life. And although those IgGs aren't being absorbed, they're binding up pathogens locally. They're stimulating the gut to grow. We know about 70% of our immune system is within our gut. So if we have a healthier, more robust gut, we can fight off disease better. And so don't get me wrong, we have this high level of failure of passive transfer, but not all of our calves are suffering from it. But which calf failed passive transfer and is going to suffer from it, right?
Yeah. And like you mentioned earlier, it's gonna hit the bottom line as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Bill, do you have anything to ask Travis here or add before I ask him the last question?
Sure. I guess the only other thing I would say is, what is a website that you can provide for people if they have some questions or seeking additional information, or is there social media content available as well?
Yeah, so we have a social media page. We have Facebook. We have both a Colostrix Facebook as well as SCCL Facebook. SCCL.com has all of our literature available on it, all the product detailers. So if you want more information, you can go there. We do a podcast called Beyond Colostrum. So that goes out routinely. Within that, we oftentimes talk about things beyond colostrum, so what are some calving tips and things like that. But yeah, we're very present on the web and social media, present at most of your major conferences. So we'll be at World Dairy Expo. We're at NCBA every year. Oftentimes have booths at those. So if you have more questions, come find us. Yeah.
So what, just from all of this, if you could wrap it up and put it in a pretty bow, what would you tell producers and veterinarians is the bottom line about what we talked about?
Yeah. So the bottom line is that colostrum is the calf's immune system, whether that comes from maternal colostrum or through replacer. Think about a bag of replacer. That is a calf's immune system for the first 20 days of its life. And I don't think we can stress that enough. Just like you said, Bill, oftentimes we're reacting to these situations, but if we understood the importance of that immune system and how one bag can provide everything a calf needs to fight off all the disease that it comes into contact, I think we'd put a little more emphasis or importance on it in our calving operations.
Excellent. Yeah. Travis, this has been a perfect first episode. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you, Bill. And I'm sure we'll have you back on here real soon to talk beyond colostrum.
All right. Sounds great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.